Music and dance and 60s. Talking about the music in the 60s is talking about all of rock. The music of the 60s was undoubtedly the barrier of an exposition of classes, of a change of classes in the world. Fashion, society, and politics were a change forever. Women's liberation and the fight against the racial discrimination were the two prominent figures. The 60s were times to dream. They just wanted to fight for a change. They believed in something that today seems like something to be an utopia. They defended idealism, fighting for our groups until they seemed subject by the male and the white elites. To find their place in society. The British invasion was the great feature in the 60s music in Alemania until the middle decade. Numerous rock bands from the United Kingdom made an impact on international scenes with great popularity, and this marked the first style revolution in the place music. In the 1962, the Beatles were consolidated the ever-changing way of dressing, and his public statements had an immense influence on society. They achieved the #1 position in the music of the USA. And then the Rolling Stones released their first album in 1964, and the following the part of the Beatles, they entered the American musician circles. Its validity has been interrupted, and even today the fans continue to enjoy its receipts. Not even was the rock in the 60s. Italian's music began the rate of a great impact in Europe. Success came from the hand to romantic songs by men, with the parents of the Gallians, and by the woman by the strength and elegance. As for the enjoyment of music, there were 3 ways to listen: radio, vinyl, and a concert. The music on the radio was free, and you could be listening to who was being in the case of the time. However, both who listening to a vinyl or a concert had a special interest on the group. About dance in 60s. Did you know that the dance has been present in our daily lives since ancient times? It's known that the prehistoric there was already needed to communicate daily, but it's true that for many years dance was used for rituals or ceremonies. The twist. In the 60s was undoubtedly the decade of the twist, which was initially a dance that was considered vulgar and obscene, since it could be a dance without a partner, and its origin came from an African American style and making a clear movement of the hips. The stroll was not unlike dance line, consisted of a rows of a woman, of a man, and a man facing each other, with the main of pair movement between lines and slowing at the end of the line. The stroll designed for the slow songs and was made famous by the hit sung by the Diamonds. The mashed potato. The exception was that the dance began with a background movement, turning the heel inward with the wave and in front of the foot, repeating many times as you decide. A popular song his dance was Mashed Potato by Didi Sharp, and was something like this. Then the Monster Mash. The dance consisted of a couple holding each other as we can see in the image, in a strange position while performing the typical move of these dances, like a monster. And finally, the Ugly Ugly. The 60s rock ball Olympics songs called Holy Uli, which started a dance craze in 60s. Frank Rocco started the dance created in a Cadillac hotel in Miami Beach, Florida. It's something like this.
Movie making remained in a slump at the start of the 1960s. Movie makers struggled to come up with successful strategies to combat the rising popularity of television. One strategy was to make big budget spectacles. For example, Cleopatra, released in 1963, cost about $37 million to make, which included exotic filming locations. So filmgoers loved such movies. And also, audiences were attracted by another kind of movie, which couldn't be aired at TV. And I'm talking about movies that contain sex, violence, or unconventional behavior. Comedies like The Apartment and Kiss Me Stupid, dramas like The Graduate or Bonnie and Clyde, and adventure pictures like the James Bond films, Dr. No and Goldfinger, all had content that was deemed too mature for TV. This type of content soon became one of the film industry's biggest problems, as groups like the Catholic Legion of Decency publicized the ratings of movies that were considered unacceptable. Later, on 1968, the Motion Picture Association of America started a rating system that is still in use. This system included the ratings G for general audiences, M for mature, but later changed to PG, R for restricted, and X for those movies that were made or meant to be for people above the age of 18. Despite these limitations, filmmakers produced some of history's best known films in the decade, including films like Planet of the Apes, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Psycho. This time was when the films adapted from theater stories began to appear. West Side Story was adapted from the popular Broadway play of the same name. Likewise, the American theater culture provided several other plays that made it to the big screen, including Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, filmed in 1966, The Odd Couple, filmed in 1968, and made into a television series in 1970, and the first rock and roll musical took place in the 60s decade, Hair, filmed in 1978, and so on. Some of the film representatives of that time were Ingmar Bergman, who were a writer, Stanley Kramer, who were a producer, and Elia Kazan, who were a director. But also we have actors like John Wayne, Elizabeth Taylor, and Jack Lemmon. And then we have Florence Ziegfeld, who were a producer, George White, who were a producer, director, author, dancer, and actor, Tommy Tune, who were an actor, dancer, choreographer, and director. These people representing the theater of the 60s decade.
Hi, I'm going to be talking you about my era, which are the 60s. In this year, social relations decline and seek the renewal of the structure. The form from language and style is the experimental literature. Some of the relevant novels from this era are Luis Martin Santos, I know him, Hongo Tori Solid, I never met him, but he is not my kind of friend. Jaime Gil de Viedna, José Ángel Valiente, it's me. The poets of the late 60s are called the New Spanish poets. These poets are like the exquisite and the decadent of the refined sentience, but also the Moffats, characteristic of the new consumer society. We are the new ones. Through this decade, as it goes, producing a growing reaction of the novel as social process of renewal takes place in a narrative. We as poets of the 60s are aware of the prosems of social poetry. That's why they propose as the first objective the renewal of language, poetic with great attention to values, aesthetic and formal of the poem. The feature of poetry of these years are presence of the intimate, taste for the memory, expression of personal experience, criticisms of Franco with irony and acid humor. We love the acid humor. Features of this novel that seeks formal renewal are the argument of losing importance and the action that is minimal. The protagonist are begins without form and blood barrier. Jump back in time and anticipations about. The structure is sometimes labyrinth, and that reader must go through it can even left open so the reader's imagination conclude the argument. The demolition of these traditional elements of the novel, plot, characters, space, time, leads to talk about anti-novels. Sometimes the lexicon is subtle and systematic, complex, and in other cases the language is colloquial and the short sentences. I love to my hero because, well, in my own personal words, I will say that the 60s will define the whole future of literature with the novel, with the novela, because we manage them as a unique way that the people have never seen them. Well, thanks for your attention and hope everything is good in 2021. Bye bye.
The 60s were a time of transformation which brought with it the paradigm shift of thought, the break with old values and the creation of new musical, artistic, and constructive movements. Architecture was used in the 60s as an instrument of political and social as well as cultural manifestation. It was a time full of dark projects based on questionable concepts, in the search of new heights, and in the breaking of the old paradigm. The architecture of the 60s had some key features and inspired world-renowned movements. Today, there are having a notable influence in the construction sector still. Some examples could be the Ant Farm in San Francisco, USA. It was inspired by the Bay Area counterculture. Its avant-garde design practice celebrated the flexibility and lightness of architecture. Other will be Archigram in the United Kingdom, construction made with fantastic science fiction reference, advertising creation, comics, and pop art. The group that made it, Archigram, designed large drugstores, portable homes, inflatable villages, mobile cities. They were these designs that were adaptable and very advanced at the time. Archisum Associati. It is in Italy. The design studio started with the eclectic and kitsch aesthetic, making use of satire, subversion, and the reality of caricature. It was represented in sculptural forms and very vivid colors.
Hello, I am one of the most famous artists from the 1960s. I am the creator of the pop art. If you don't recognize me, don't worry, I'm gonna explain you during this video. In this video, I'm gonna explain you exactly how painting and sculpture has been evolved from the 1960s. It was a great moment. I still remember it, my first day that I was doing the pop art placement. A great art that I made, a great painting. But what is paint? Or what is painting for you? Well, on my case, the definition for painting will be is the process of using paint in a picture as a projected code or as a decoration. What it exactly means? This means that it's exactly that paint we can use it on everywhere. We can use it for do some creative stuff, awesome stuff, things that you never know or things that you never imagined before to do. Here's one famous thing that I was looking for, that I was remembering for. On the 1960s, our witnesses at the right of the movement, which had to reshape it and created new aesthetic language and style. What does this mean? That in the 1960s, were another era to show painting in another way and to explain how painting was evolving in this case. For example, this is where the pop became the symbol of a new lifestyle against the conservative high culture. So basically, the pop art is one of the most famous art that was made in the 1960s. It was typically great dimension from the images and a great painting that we can say. In visual art movement, such like I was saying, we have pop art, we have the pantastic art, we have op art, we have minimalism and conceptual art, and the appreciation of happiness. This means that we have all these pieces of paints and things that were made in the 1960s was the most famous thing ever, one of the most famous era for painting and art. We were our art and our painting became the most significant and shining concepts on the 1960s art world. Like I was saying, this kind of new art became the most famous because it was expressing and it was showing a lot of things that you cannot image. Some people doesn't understand that way the paint and the art, but now from here, that's why we live, that's why we exist, that's why we are here. I will say a little concept from the history. For a number of historians, we had a rebellion on the 1960s because there were a lot of people that were against our ideas and were against our kind of art. We don't understand why, because it was doesn't something not clear for us. But we make a rebellion because they were against our art and because they became so rude with our arts. They became very strict. They became discriminative and became a lot of bad things that you can never imagine. Another thing that we dislike obviously from those people, so we were in charge to do a rebellion, to fight for our art, to fight for our creativity, and to fight for other stuff that were made it on there. About anything else, art was the most thing that you can ever make. It was one of the most things that you can express or explain some things. The visual art on the 1960s, the leading movement was the pop art. Like I was saying, pop art is one of the most famous art ever from the history. Now I want to tell you how some of other painters that were on the time and were famous like me. For example, we have Roger Lichtenstein. He was the comic book panelist and art. He was one of my famous friends on that time. I still remember he made the comic. He made now the first time that the comic were colored, the expression and the way of inspiring and a way to make an impact to the readers and to the people that were looking at that, who would say the comic on the case. Now I will tell you another one that is one of the most famous either is Yapper Jones. He was a symbolist as an instructor. He said this kind of art. He was a lover from his country first of all, and he combined art with culture and with I will say political things because his first art was the the United States flag, but in like a 3D dimension, in an awesome art you can never image, and nobody has the technology obviously to do a 3D art. He had the knowledge and he had the expression. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That art was the most famous thing at that time. Now, moving on, I want to explain you now the sculptures. What were the sculptures? Sculptures are the most thing ever. Either we can express some communications, we can express things, and we can express concept either that people doesn't know before. But what is a sculpture in basic forms? I will tell you. The art of making two or three-dimensional representative or abstract forms, especially by carving stone or wood or by casting metal or plastic. With every material that you want, you can make a sculpture. Just use your imagination and your creativity and BAM! You have a sculpture there. You have made something that expressed maybe something for you or tell or you try to tell someone something that you are trying to explain and to show people. For example, the 1960s there was built the sculpture of the museum collectors. Extended the sculpture garden and the currently organizing principle of the museum four-floor collection galleries that was made for thanks by art. We have this kind of building, we have this kind of stuff that now you can go and see the art and the sculptures that we made on our time. I want to include one of the sculptors makers. In this case it's going to be David Smith with the Cube X, made it on 1963. A great sculptor obviously. It was how can you imagine, how can you think that kind of dimension can you make, and how you can express something. What he tried to communicate, it was to tell you dimensions and the structure from art. It was a great sculpture that he made on that time. Another representative figure and another famous sculpture maker, it was Alexander Calder with his famous sculpture Sanded Butterfly. This awesome butterfly, believe me, is one of the most famous sculptures around the world. We can express happiness in this case. He tried to tell us something that some people cannot communicate or something that no one can understand too. So he tried to express his feelings and his way of thinking on this case. And this was on 1964, after 1 year after David Smith the sculptor. Yeah, I think so. For it. Now moving on, I will finish this. I will finish this sculpture with Pater Newman's and his famous sculpture, The Broken Obelisk, on 1967. Either like I was saying, he had the creativity. I thanks this man for expressing this kind of sculpture. It was an amazing thing that you can ever imagine. Well, I think the time is over for us. But tell me, I would like to ask you one little thing before we done here. Do you like art, or what is art for you, or painting, or what is a sculpture for you? And another thing, what would you do on my place? Do you think we were like the genius of art? or the genius from something else that you can never image? You can tell me. I'm Andy Warhol, and this is the great video ever from the 1960s. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye.